You see those people taking the knee when they're playing our great national anthem.
Those people, the president said. He followed that up this morning with a tweet praising NASCAR, which in its entire history has only had 4 African-American drivers in its premier racing series. And the president is also feuding with the NBA. Since speaking in Alabama, he's tweeted 13 times, either directly or indirectly, about the NFL and the flag. He's tweeted 7 times about health care, once about North Korea, and not a single time about Puerto Rico. More now on all of this. CNN Jim Acosta joins us from the White House. So, Jim, what's the latest?
Well, I understand the White House was clinging to the fantasy today that everybody is out of bounds except the president. And we saw that in the White House briefing room earlier today. I tried to press Sarah Sanders, the press secretary, on the president's comments and whether he was trying to ignite some sort of culture war in this country when he spent the better part of the weekend, as you mentioned, going after predominantly African-American athletes, while earlier this morning praising NASCAR and the way their fans honor and salute the flag. Here's a bit of that exchange. Is he trying to wage something of a cultural war?
Not at all. The president's not talking about race. The president's talking about pride in our country. What you saw yesterday were players and fans of all races joining together as Americans to honor our service members. That's what the president's talking about. That's what his focus is on. As you guys know, the president's got an event here in a few minutes, so we're going to close there. Thanks so much. Have a good day.
Could get a follow-up question there, Anderson, but we should point out, I talked to a Republican advisor who talks to this White House all the time, advises this White House on what it should do with its political strategy, who said, yes, the president is, in fact, waging a cultural war. In the view of this advisor, he's winning the cultural war by turning what he described as millionaire professional athletes into Hillary Clinton. This advisor sees the president as essentially trolling those athletes in the same way that he trolls Hillary Clinton.
The chief of staff, I understand, has weighed in on this.
That's right, Anderson. He talked to my colleague Jeff Zeleny earlier tonight. It made a brief comment saying that he believes that everybody should stand up and honor the flag for what he described as a lousy 3 minutes. Now, earlier today, we were hearing from sources, my colleague Jeff Zeleny was hearing from sources saying that John Kelly, the chief of staff, was not pleased with what happened over the weekend with what the president had done in igniting this controversy. The president registered his displeasure with that. He put up a couple of tweets, so we can show you those tweets, Anderson, if we can show them on screen. Yes, here's one. Says, General John Kelly totally agrees with my stance on NFL players and the fact that they should not be disrespecting our flag or our country. And then there's another one that says that there's a tremendous backlash against the NFL and its players for disrespect for our country with the hashtag stand for our anthem. But Anderson, I was talking to an associate of the president earlier today who was saying that, listen, this is something, these kinds of cultural comments, these incendiary comments that the president makes at these rallies from time to time, he actually thinks about these in advance. These are premeditated in many cases, and that he'll talk about these sorts of comments with his aides, sort of batting them around with aides and friends and so on before he goes out and makes these kinds of comments publicly. And sometimes his aides and his advisors and friends will say, no, Mr. President, don't do that. But the president often goes with his gut and will make these kinds of inflammatory comments. And I think that's what you saw over the weekend here. Keep in mind, Anderson, we spent the better part of today talking about the NFL and so on, and not those items you mentioned at the beginning of this newscast, which is all of those people suffering in Puerto Rico and healthcare and so on. Those issues got short shrift today over here at the White House.
So it's interesting you say he plans these things out. I mean, you know, a lot of people have raised the question, is he just intentionally trying to do this aid to distract from failures on health care or any other issues of the day, or is it to stoke racial divides? I mean, is it about appealing to the base? You know, he referenced those people. Is that what it's about?
Anderson, I can't tell you what's in the president's heart after covering him for a year and a half, but what has passed is prologue. The president questioned whether Barack Obama was born in this country, the first African-American president. Just a few weeks ago over at Trump Tower, he described people in the white supremacist movement as having very fine people. But again, Anderson, you know, when I talk to advisors, aides to the president, they claim and they swear up and down that he's not racist, but they do admit privately that he does like to stoke these kinds of controversies because they do at times serve as a distraction and sort of that bright, shiny object that you hear from time to time and pulls our attention away from some of the more pressing issues that are out there. This is a president who is losing on health care tonight. He is not going to repeal and replace Obamacare, something he said he would do the very beginning of his administration. We're not talking about that quite as much as we are talking about the NFL, Anderson.
All right, Jim Acosta, thanks very much. For Seattle Seahawks defensive end Michael Bennett, the political and personal side of this story overlap for him. He says police in Las Vegas stopped him as he and others were fleeing what sounded like gunshots after the Floyd Mayweather-Conor McGregor fight. He says officers singled him out, in his words, quote, for nothing more than being a black man in the wrong place at the wrong time. Bennett says police held a gun to his head and threatened